Hello, and welcome to the introduction to the Viking Opal 670. We're going to kind of walk through this machine to see what it's all about. It's a wonderful sewing machine. So let's get started by just pointing out some of the key features of this machine. Some of the obvious features on the machine: it has a much longer arm than your typical sewing machine. It's also well lit, has LED lighting. It has one above the arm and another set by the needle, so the lighting is really good on this model. It's got a touch screen on it, so you can navigate just by simply touching the screen. One of my favorite features is the scissor button. So it has automatic thread cutters. When you touch that button, it'll cut your threads for you, top and bottom. Built-in needle threader. Viking special bobbins, which only go in the machine the correct way. Really is a well-designed machine. The way you thread this sewing machine is you start at the spool of thread on the spool pen. Now you'll notice this spool pen goes both horizontal and vertical. Most machines nowadays use the thread in the horizontal position. This is so that the spool does not have to rotate when forming a stitch. The thread just simply falls off the end, so you maintain better tensions. So you take your spool of thread, whatever size you like. It doesn't have to be these long skinny ones like I'm using. Put it on the spool pen, put your spool cap on the end, and it gives you 3 different size spool caps. So you start at this first metal guide. We just go over the top, follow the threading path, down, back up. There's a little lever in there called the take-up lever. Make sure you see the thread click all the way to the front of that take-up lever. Very, very important. If you miss this lever, you're just going to get tangles of thread. It won't sew at all. So from the take-up lever, you go straight down. You have a little catch right at the needle clamp there. And then we use the automatic needle threader. To use the automatic needle threader, hold the thread off to the side. That first hook will grab the thread. The little wire will then grab the other end of the thread and pull a nice loop through the needle. Do that again. I pulled the loop out with my fingers. Then you just pull the thread tail through the rest of the way. Use a little cutter on the side of the machine. Very easy to thread this machine. Now the way that it winds the bobbin, there's a couple different ways you can wind your bobbin. You can wind it just from your spool to this little button guide to the bobbin winder. Very easy. But you can also on this machine wind your bobbins without having to unthread the sewing machine. You wind it right from your needle thread. Viking has done this for many years. It's a great feature. It's one of my favorite. So what we do is we take our empty bobbin. Now these aren't your ordinary bobbins. These bobbins will only go in the machine the proper way, and they'll only fit on the bobbin winder the proper way. I cannot put this bobbin on the bobbin winder upside down. It simply will not work. Also, I cannot put it in the machine upside down. It will not go in. So we take our bobbin, put it on our bobbin winder. Then we just take our needle thread. We stretch our needle thread across these little metal plates here, which keeps the thread from cutting into the machine, to this little guide. And then just wrap it right around the bobbin a few times. Push it over, and then we are off and running. Really, really easy to rewind your bobbins right from your needle thread. When the bobbin is full, it will slow to a stop. We'll go ahead and let this one fill up. Okay, we're just about there. Okay, now we have a full bobbin. We can just take it off of our bobbin winder. There's a little razor blade right there that'll cut off our tail. So we take our bobbin now and we can put it in the machine. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so you can see how this is done. So once we have our bobbin, we just drop it into the machine. The Husqvarna symbol will be facing up on the bobbins, but again, it won't fit in upside down, so it'll only go in the right way. You drop it in, Now we need to pull the bobbin thread into this little metal catch right at the base of the bobbin case, and that's the little tension area. What I like to do is I like to put one finger on the bobbin so that I can pull the thread tightly with the other hand. Bring it in until you feel it click in. Then you bring it to the first little guide on the gray piece down to where the razor blade is. That will cut off the tail. And there's little arrows that point you along the correct path. Then, now that you have the bobbin tail cut off, you just take your cover and you put it back on. Now what you don't do is you do not have to rotate your hand wheel to pick up your bobbin thread like you would on an old machine. You just simply start sewing, it'll pick it up on the first stitch. It's easy. Okay, let's do a quick rundown of what some of the buttons are on the front of the machine, and then we'll actually do some sewing with the machine so you can see how some of these buttons function. The first button here is obvious to most people. It's the reverse button. So if you hold the reverse button down while you're sewing, of course it's going to do your back stitching. If the machine is not sewing and you hold down the reverse button, you'll see the little light on it turn on. That means it's going to permanently stay in reverse until you hit the button. So if you're sewing and you hit it, it just reverses and immediately comes forward. But if you're not sewing and you hold the button down, you'll get the light indicator to let you know you're permanently in reverse. Now the button above that is your start-stop button, meaning that you can sew without your foot control. So if I hit that button, the machine would start sewing. Now the thing that I like about the way that Viking is set up, unlike other machines that have start-stop buttons, is that on the Viking, they will let you use the start-stop button and also use your foot control at the same time, meaning that other machines will disable the start-stop button while you have the foot control plugged in. You actually have to physically unplug the foot control before you're able to use the start-stop button on most machines. But the way that that Viking does it, which is really great, is when you use a start-stop button, the machine will start sewing like you think it will, and then anytime you touch the foot control, the foot control will instantly take back over. So it's really a well-designed start-stop button, better than most machines the way they do it. So that's the start-stop button. The one above it that says stop, you'll see this shortly because we'll do a little bit of sewing, but this can work a couple different ways. If you have a pattern, say you have a little heart stitch and you hit the stop button, it'll just do one single heart stitch. Or anytime you're sewing and you hit the stop button, it'll finish the pattern you're on, it'll lock the stitch for you automatically and stop. So it has a few different ways of working. Also works when we're doing a name. So when we write a name, we can tell it that we want it to stop after the name. So we'll play with that in a few minutes if you don't fully understand what I'm referring to by that. The one next to it is our fix button. The fix is an automatic lock feature. So when you're sewing and you touch the fix button, it'll automatically lock the stitch for you so you don't have to always backstitch. Next to it is one of my favorites, is the automatic thread cutter. So you hit that button and it cuts the top and bottom threads automatically. Next to that we have our needle up-down position. So the machine normally when you turn it on stops with the needle in the up position for you automatically. When you touch this button, it will then stop with the needle in the down position. So important feature for a lot of people. And then the speed control. So you can turn the speed of the machine down if it's going too fast for you. These machines do tend to run a little faster than your average sewing machine. So if you need to limit the speed, you can do it there. You can also use that with the start-stop button. So you can turn the speeds to where you want it, and then you can use your start-stop button. And you can adjust the speeds as it's actually sewing. It's nice. So that's the front layout of buttons. Now on the display here, you have a lot going on the display. The display tells you what stitch you're on, what foot to use. It has Viking's exclusive sewing advisor, which is a really nice feature. We'll get to that in a second. Tells you what stitch number you're on, your current tension settings. See, this machine uses electronic tensions, so you do not have to manually adjust your tensions ever. The machine will take care of it for you. If you wanted to change the default tensions that the machine has set itself to, you can do it just right here with the plus and minus on the screen. Down below it, here below the 2.5 number, you have a plus and minus. That is your stitch length, so how long your stitch is. The plus and minus next to it When you are on a straight stitch, this will move your needle to different positions for straight stitching, so you can put your needle anywhere that you want to sew. When you're on a zigzag stitch, that's going to determine how wide the zigzag is, and we'll play with that. These little funny diamond symbols here are different types of mirror imaging, meaning that you can flip-flop the stitches around, and I'll show you that in a few minutes when we pull up a different stitch. We have all of our settings for our machine. It's in our tools menu. That's the screwdriver and wrench. You have our heart menu. Our heart menu is our personal menu of stitches, ones that we have saved into a special folder. It's kind of our favorites or stitches that we've created. Programming is where we put different stitches together, and we'll also play with that. We have little scroll buttons so we can scroll up and down and scroll through stitches. So that's one way to get to different stitches. But the other way is just to go to your stitch menu button, which is right here at the top. When you select your stitch menu button, you'll see that our stitches are broken up into 4 categories of stitches, and then you can key in the number of the stitch you want. You also have your special heart menu, and we have our alphabets here. Okay, so now that's a very basic rundown. So now that we've seen that, let's go ahead and do a little bit of sewing so you can see how some of these features work. Okay, first let me show you how the fix button works. So the fix button I was telling you is an automatic locking stitch. So when you turn on the fix button and you start sewing, the first thing the machine's going to do is it's going to lock your stitch for you automatically. When you get to the end of your stitch or your seam and you're ready to finish with an end lock, you can just touch the fix button again and it will lock the end for you automatically. Now another trick with that is if you start your seam and you have the fix turned on so it locks the beginning for you automatically, when you get to the end, if you're going to cut your threads anyway, hit the scissor button, because what the scissor button is going to do is it's also going to lock your stitch. It's just going to cut afterwards automatically. So it'll do it all in one step for you instead of hitting 2 buttons. Now we're on stitch number 1, which is our standard straight stitch. On this machine, there's also a straight stitch, which is stitch number 4 in menu 1. And the 2 straight stitch, they look the same, but there's a difference between them. If we do a fix stitch on stitch number 4, so it locks for us automatically, and then we have it lock the end. Number 4 does a much bolder lock, stronger, it's larger, it's bigger. If you can see it there, it's a really large lock, where if you look at it on regular stitch number 1, it's a finer knot. So it depends on how big you want your knot. So that's the difference between choice number 1 and choice number 4. Okay, so I was talking a little bit about the stop button and how you can make it do one pattern of stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in a decorative stitch. So the decorative stitch that we will do will be one of our little hearts, 37. And you can see there's little hearts on the screen. If I hit the stop button, you can now see there's only one heart. So that means it'll just do that one heart pattern. Or, if I am doing a length of hearts, and if I hit my stop button, it's going to finish the heart I was currently sewing on before it stops. So it'll always finish the pattern completely before it stops its sewing when you hit the stop button. We're going to use the stop button too in just a minute when we're writing a name. I just wanted to show you a little bit hands-on on how some of those buttons work. Let me show you real quick the start-stop too while we have some fabric in there. So if I wanted to turn my speed, and you'll see a little speed indicator on the screen turn down, I can put it wherever I want, use my start-stop button, and it'll start the machine sewing. If I need to turn it up, I can turn it up right here. If I wanted my foot control to instantly take back over, all I have to do is touch my foot control with my foot and it instantly takes back over. Yeah. It's wonderful. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of programming here with the machine. So if we go to, well, we'll start by doing some alphabets. So we'll go to our stitch button here. This is where all of our stitches are located in the machine. I know you can't see the top visor, so let me tilt the camera a little bit. This top visor on the machine is where it shows you all of the stitches the machine has, and they're all numbered, so that's how you know what number to key in on the display. Okay, so if we toggle over to our alphabet icon at the top of our screen, we're going to get different font choices. Now, 2 of them you'll notice are in other languages. For English, we have 2 different font styles. So I kind of like this one here, so I'm going to select this font. It comes up like a typewriter. You just select the letters that you want to write. I mean, it's really, really easy. You have uppercase and lowercase. So I'll pick an uppercase J, and it's going to go to uppercase first, and you'll see the J on the screen. If I wanted to switch to lowercase, I could switch it. I can switch it to lowercase, but let's go ahead and write the whole name in uppercase letters. So I got, my name is John, so J-O-H-N. Okay, so I wrote John. Now, if I start sewing this, it's going to do John as a border. So it's going to do John, 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 John. But I don't want that. I just want just my name and for it to stop. So the way that I'm going to do it, I have 2 different ways I can do this. I can either hit the stop button, which is going to put a little stop sign on the screen. So then it'll do my name and it'll simply stop. But I don't want it. I don't want the stop sign, so I'm going to delete that. So I'm going to hit the little X, which will take that away. What I want it to do is do my name and then cut for me automatically. So instead of hitting the stop sign, I'm going to hit my scissor button, and it's going to put a little C on the screen to let me know there's a cut there. To do this name, very, very easy. It's not like machines in the past that used to do names. There's no other hoops to jump through. All I do is hit the foot control or hit my start stop button. And now it's going to cut automatically for me. And I get my name. So when you're in this alphabet screen or your program screen, you can write a whole sentence. It doesn't just have to be a name. If you're making a quilt label, you can say, you know, made with love for so-and-so. So you can write a good amount of characters into the machine. Now, if you did make a custom label, or you spend a lot of time creating something, and you're going to reuse this, my recommendation would be to send it to your heart menu. And this is your special menu of stitches, the ones that you want to use a lot, or ones that you've created. And it's very, very simple to send something you have on the screen to your heart menu. You just click the arrow pointing to the heart. So let's do that now. And you'll see I've done this before on this machine because I've got all kinds of things in there. So I'll go ahead and scroll down and find an empty spot. Or if I wanted to replace it with something already there, I can just click on a spot that has a stitch in it, and it would overwrite it. So we're going to select number 6, and there's my John I just wrote. So now, let's say I'm coming back to this, and I'm coming back to this a month later, and I need to do my label. To get to my heart menu, it's with all my other stitches. So you'll see at the top tab, so these are my regular stitches, there's my heart stitches, and my alphabet. So I can just go to my heart stitches, and if I want to pull up something I've done before, like this one, John with the heart, I can just touch it, and there it is. Very simple. Heart menu is great. Heart menu works with other stitches also. So if you were on just a regular straight stitch, and let's say you were doing this straight stitch, but you like to do maybe a scant 1/4 inch, and you like to use your regular foot, and you move your needle over, you know, to get your scant 1/4 inch, and then you want your stitch length to be longer. And if this is how you like to do this stitch, and you do it like this a lot, then just do it, make the stitch the one time, and send it to your heart menu. I'm going to overwrite on top of that stitch there. And so it has save that stitch into my heart menu for me, and I can go back and pull up that stitch whenever I want. So it's not just for things that names that you've written, it's also for any stitch that you alter, change, that you want to use again. You can just put in your special heart menu. Or if you use, say, a handful of stitches from each menu, and you don't want to have to go between the different menus, you can take all the stitches that you use and you can put them into one menu and have it right there in your heart menu. Heart menu is great. Really, really like it. Okay, so let's get out of there. Let's go back to programming screen. So we can get to programming two different ways. Anytime that you go to the alphabet tab, you're automatically in programming. But you also have a programming button here, so anytime you touch the program button, you also will go straight into programming. So I still have my name on there, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So I'm just going to hold down my checkmark button and it'll ask me if I want to delete everything, and I do. So I'll just wipe my name out completely. If you touch this button one time, it'll just delete one character, but if you hold it down, it's going to wipe out everything. So let's combine a couple stitches together so you can see how this is done. It's easy. So we're in program screen, we have a blank screen, we haven't put anything on it. So we'll then go up and we'll find some stitches to put into it. So we'll go to our stitch menu button, we'll go over to our decorative stitch category, and let's combine, there's a couple stitches, you can combine any stitch, but there's a few that go together pretty well, like the car and the trailer. So let's do that. That's 33. So you get the little car on the screen, and let's go back now and we'll pick stitch 34, which is the trailer. Okay, so we get a little car and trailer. So if we want to sew this out, all I have to do is hit the foot control. Cute little car and trailer. Yep. So it's very easy to combine stitches together on the machine. There's really not a whole lot to it. So I'm going to go back to my stitch button, and we're just going to pick just a regular straight stitch again, kind of reset the machine back to normal. And the thing to remember with these newer machines, it doesn't matter what button you hit, what you click on, if you turn the machine off and turn it back on, everything kind of goes back to normal, sets you back to just a normal straight stitch. I want to show you a little bit about the mirror image buttons real quick because I touched on it a little bit earlier. So let's go find a stitch that has some direction to it so you can see how we can flip-flop it around. So maybe stitch 12. Okay, so we can see stitch 12, straight line at the bottom, kind of angles up. So if we use our mirror image button, we can change the direction, or we can change the direction this way or this way. So now you can see how the mirror image buttons flip the stitch around. Now one thing that's important about on this machine to know, because it's a great feature, is everything that you see on the screen is the actual size that it sews. When you alter the stitch, it will change on the screen to show you exactly what you expect to get when you sew it on your fabric. Yeah, it's a wonderful feature. When you're doing things like stitches that are really close together, like satin stitches, let's go ahead and pull up menu 3 where some of our like scalloped edge and different satin stitches are, and we will pick maybe number 2. So you got a tight little stitch there. The thing that I like, the way that they've designed the machine, it's really smart. You can see the satin stitch on the screen, and it's a real tight together stitch. If I play with the length button, what it's going to do is it's going to lengthen out the pattern, or it's going to bring it closer together. But what it's not doing is it's not changing the fact that it's a satin stitch. So I'm elongating the pattern without changing the overall density of the stitch. But if I wanted to change the density, the machine lets me do that also. And this is good to know. So I'm elongating the pattern and it stays a satin stitch. But if I wanted to work with like a really heavy thread, maybe a 30 weight embroidery thread, and I felt like the satin stitch was just too tight for that, and I wanted to spread those stitches out, I have this button that pops up when I'm doing satin stitches that says ALT for Alt. So if I touch the Alt button, it'll then change my pattern length button to my density button. And now I can spread my stitches apart. And again, everything you see on the screen is an actual size. So when I'm spreading my stitches apart, you'll see how the stitch really kind of comes apart. And if I bring it back down, or I can go the other way and make it dense. So they give you all the abilities to really fine tune your stitch, both on elongating the pattern and also changing the density when you're doing these satin stitches. Let's go back to a regular straight stitch here. Yeah, wonderful. Whoops, that's not a regular straight stitch. I want to be on menu 1. Okay, there we go, regular straight stitch. Your machine's broken up into 4 menus. You got your regular utility stitches is menu 1. Menu 2 is all of your quilting stitches, and then 3 and 4 are all different kinds of decorative stitches. For quilters, a lot of times they'll be in their quilting menu, which is menu number 2. That's where you find your built-in 1/4 inch stitch and some of the other favorite quilting stitches that the machine does. Let's go ahead and do a buttonhole stitch. This machine does great buttonholes. Viking has always done really nice buttonholes. It's very easy to do it. They give you this little gadget that comes with the machine. It's the buttonhole tracker foot. So what this is going to do is it's going to measure out our buttonholes and do a really nice, perfect buttonhole for you. You just attach it to the machine, just pops on like your other feet do. Now you'll notice there's a little plug-in, looks like a headphone jack. There's a little spot right kind of behind the LED light where you can plug that in. So once you get it plugged into the machine, then we have to select a buttonhole stitch. All our buttonhole stitches are in menu 1, and there's quite a selection of buttonhole stitches. So we'll go to menu 1 and we'll pick just a real standard buttonhole, which is number 25. You'll see the buttonhole symbol come up on the screen. It knows I had the buttonhole tracker foot plugged into the machine, so it's going to measure the buttonhole for me automatically. And on the screen I can pick what size buttonhole I need. It measures in millimeters. The default is going to be 16 millimeters, so I can set the length to whatever I want. If I'm unsure what length I need for my buttonhole, I'm going to tilt the camera for a second, but down at the bottom of the machine here there's a little gauge in millimeters, so I can take my button, I can hold it up to my gauge and see what size I need to do. So if this was my button, I'd be doing a 16 millimeter buttonhole. So now that I've selected the size that I want to do, the other step that I need to remember to do is I have a little wheel here. This little wheel on the left-hand side has a little white spot in it. That's all I need to remember, is to start with the white facing up. That's how it starts measuring the buttonhole properly. And that's it. Hit my start button and it'll do the rest. Now you'll notice it locks and it cuts for me automatically, and I get a beautiful buttonhole. The reason why it's really beautiful for a couple reasons. One is this machine does have electronically controlled tensions, so it knows to automatically turn the tensions down to a good location for buttonhole. If you can see the screen now, it says 2.4, where we were doing a regular stitch it said 4.6. So it's turned the tensions down to give me a nice appearance for my buttonhole. Also, the machine will feed both columns of the buttonhole in the exact same direction, which also gives you a really nice looking buttonhole. Now, the beautiful thing with this buttonhole tracker foot is I can repeat this buttonhole as many times as I want. See that? Beautiful. Now, if you decided that you wanted your buttonholes to be either tighter, denser, closer together, or further apart, if you notice on the screen, you now have that Alt button is back. And if you touch that, then you can, instead of changing the length of the buttonhole, you can change the overall density of the buttonhole. Okay, so buttonholes, really easy on this machine, does awesome buttonholes. You can use the fully automatic buttonhole tracker foot, or you can do manual buttonholes, kind of the old-fashioned way that the machine will do both. Just depends on whether or not you have this foot plugged in or not. So let me show you a little something else here. We have one of the exclusive features to Husqvarna Viking is its exclusive sewing advisor. To get to the sewing advisor, it's at the top of the screen. So I'm going to just touch the little sewing machine icon. And what this does is you tell the machine the type and weight of fabric that you're working with, and the machine will set itself up to better work with that fabric. Now, when you have a different fabric selection selected, it affects every stitch the machine does. It affects the tension settings, you know, how the stitch is sewn out, the recommended foot, the recommended needle. All those things change based on the fabric you have selected. So that's one thing that the sewing advisor does. Now the other is you can tell it, look, I'm sewing on a stretch light fabric and this is the technique I want to do. Now when you do that, the machine completely sets itself up. It picks the proper stitch. It does everything you need to do that technique on that piece of fabric. And I'll give you an example here. So we're on our fabric selection, and we'll stay on woven medium for a second. We'll scroll over to techniques and say we want to seam and overcast. So we'll select that. So now that we've selected seam and overcast, the machine has picked the proper stitch for me. So it picked this stitch. It's recommending I use the J foot and a size 80 needle. Because it knows that on woven medium fabric, that is the proper stitch to seam and overcast. But what if I was on a different fabric selection? So let's go back and we'll pick stretch light. We'll use the same technique, seam and overcast. Now it has changed the stitch. It's a slightly different stitch. It's definitely recommending a different needle, 75 stretch for me. Or if we went to maybe a stretch heavy, let's see what stitch it picks for me. Yep, different stitch still. So the sewing advisor is great because it's smarter than we are. It knows that when we want to do this kind of technique on this type of fabric, it knows what stitch and what foot and all the proper ways to do that stitch. What people tend to do is they'll know that their sewing machine has a seam and overcast stitch, and they'll use that same stitch for every kind of fabric because they know that's what that stitch is for. Well, yes, that's what that stitch is for, but it's only for, you know, this scenario, this type of fabric. It's not the proper stitch if you switch to a different kind of fabric. Sewing advisor knows. It knows what stitch for what kind of fabric. Let's go back and take a look at some of the choices here. So we're going to go back to woven medium. Let's look at our techniques. So the techniques here, so again, I try to emphasize this to people, is we're not selecting stitches here. That's not what we're doing. We're telling the machine what technique we want to do, and the machine picks the stitch. So we have setting a seam, we have overcasting, we have seam and overcasting, we have a basting stitch, blind hem stitch, regular hem stitch, and then we have our buttonholes. So let's do a for instance with buttonholes. Buttonholes can be tricky on different kinds of fabric. So let's maybe do a stretch light. Hard to do buttonholes in stretch light. And we'll see what it recommends. It picked the rounded buttonhole. It's picking the needle selections. It set the density for us. It set everything to make it easier to do that particular buttonhole on that kind of fabric. So great features, built-in sewing advisor. This is something that no other machine has. It's exclusive to Husqvarna Viking. There's another machine that has kind of copied it, but they had to get around Viking's patents because Viking has had this for a very long time, and it is nothing like this. This is one of the key features to Husqvarna Viking. It's really great. Okay, so let me show you the tools button here before we wrap up. The tools are where all the settings for your machine live. There's a few important ones to know about in here. Twin needle, not everybody uses a twin needle, but on occasion you might decide to do a twin needle. The machine is very smart with its twin needles. So we would go into our menu and we'd tell the machine we want to work with a twin needle. Now when you select that, you'll see a menu pop up, and it's different sizes of twin needles. So then we can go and say, okay, we're going to use a 3mm twin needle. Now what the machine has done is it has limited what you can do widthwise now that you have your 3mm twin needle in. So let's close that down. You'll see on the screen 2 needles side by side, says 3mm. So if I was to try to pick a different stitch, like a zigzag stitch, you'll see it on the screen, zigzag, but it's going to limit how wide of a zigzag you can do, because it thinks you have a twin needle in, so you can't go very wide. It's going to shrink you down so that you don't break your twin needle hitting the edges. But one of the great things is, if you put a twin needle in, now you can do all the different stitches the machine does, and you can get them perfectly side by side, 2 rows of stitches, without the worry of breaking the needle, or without having to troubleshoot and try to fine-tune where everything's going to land. The machine takes care of it all for you. Real great how it does twin needles. So let's go ahead and turn twin needles off. And let's go here. Okay, off. Okay, twin needles are off. Below that we have stitch width safety. So if we turned on stitch width safety, what this is for is if we attach a straight stitch plate to the machine. A lot of quilters like to use straight stitch plates. One thing I can tell you about this machine is it's very easy to change the stitch plates. So you'll notice there's no screws. You don't have to unscrew anything. If you wanted to switch between your regular stitch plate and your straight stitch plate, you just pop it up. The large metal plate comes off. You take your new one and just pop it on like that. Yeah, really easy. But when you select stitch width safety, it's going to prevent you from doing anything where the needle moves side to side where you might break that needle on your straight stitch plate. So I would recommend always turning that on if you do put on a straight stitch plate. Below that we have Fix Auto. Fix Auto is our automatic locking stitch. Now if you have Fix Auto turned on, that means anytime you go to a stitch or anytime after you've used the thread cutter, it'll always lock the stitch for you automatically. Every single time. So some people love that, and some people just want it to only lock when they hit the fix button. So you have your choice to turn it on or off. Cut auto, that is where there's certain times that the machine's going to cut for you automatically. After a buttonhole stitch is one, so it does the buttonhole stitch and it cuts. So if you want that on or off, you can turn that on and off. The alarms are all the noises the machine makes, so when you hit buttons it clicks. If you do things wrong it beeps at you. Screen contrast, if you want to adjust the screen you can do it there. Okay, and then we have our language selection. You can see it's set to English. The machine has a lot of different languages in it, so you can select whatever language you speak. Below that, buttonhole balance, you don't really have to worry too much about that, but if you feel like your buttonholes are just all a little too far apart or too close together and you don't like where the default is, you can kind of go in and tweak it a little bit. Or if you're doing manual buttonholes where it does both columns in 2 different directions, you can fine-tune the balance. Software version is nothing you have to worry about. That is simply for the text. And then calibrate touchscreen. This is a touchscreen model, as you can see. So you can kind of recenter the screen by doing the touchscreen adjust there. So that's the tools menu. Nothing too bad in there. But that's where you can go around and kind of play with some of your settings if you wanted to. So it's a really well-designed, thought-out machine. It's been a great seller for us. It's one of our new favorite models. We've had a great success with it since it's come out. Really well put together. I always think of these newer Husqvarna Vikings as being, 30-year machines. We sell a few different models, or not models, brands in our store. And Husqvarna Viking has always been one of our top brands, one of our absolute favorite machines. We always kind of think of them as our workhorse machines, because they really are. They're well constructed, well put together machines that last a very long time. So I hope you enjoyed the overview of the Viking Opal 670.